moment. Thank you. Because a couple people involved with the SAFE program are also interested in this question, and I thought the simple way to keep them informed is to be able to share this with them. Okay, so I'm calling this the Peak Usage Reduction Project. We can call it whatever we want, but that's an easy one. So here is a bill. This is from 2019, but they look like this. And in red, you see this capacity charge, $44.59 a month, every month. So what is this? And this is what I've been trying to understand. So it comes from our regional grid operator called PJM. PJM, you can see over at the right, this light tan area, our region, our grid stretches from Chicago on the west to Philadelphia and North Jersey and down through Virginia. So it's a pretty big area. In fact, it's the most populous of the regional grids in the United States. And one of the big tasks of PJM is to make sure that it can handle the peak electrical requirements of that region of the grid. And it won't be any surprise to learn that the peaks come in the late afternoon on hot summer days. And the worst case is when all of PJM's major cities, and that would include Philadelphia and Chicago and DC, a bunch of others, if they all coincide, then PJM, that's the maximum that PJM has to handle. And turns out that they keep very close track of that, and they look at the 5 top hours of the year in which those peaks occur. And for last year, they were all in July. They're not always all in July, but here are the ones for last year: July 6th, 4 to 5, July 9th, 5 to 6, and so on. They're either in July or August, and they're always either the 4 o'clock hour or the 5 o'clock hour. And these 5 hours of the year are used to determine our share of the peak capacity of NJM. And every customer, every commercial or industrial customer, it doesn't apply to residences, but every commercial or industrial customer, which we're considered one of, gets evaluated in terms of how much did they use of those 5 hours of peak usage. And then that's their share of the peak for the year, and they get assessed for it. And that's what that capacity charge is all about. It's not what did we use as what our peaks were, it's what were the peaks in these big cities, and what did we use when they had their peak. So what could we do about this? Oh, first of all, I haven't yet figured out, but Roy is helping me track this stuff down, how we did last year in terms of what we used in 2020. So we have some data from earlier years, but we don't have that. But this cost us $53,000 in during the 2019 year, and what it cost in the more recent year, I don't know yet, but I'm sure it was on that same order. Could have been even more. So suppose we could save some of that money. What would it take to do that? Well, okay. If we knew when those big cities had their peaks, we could warn our residents that that was going to happen. We could say, cool down your cottage before it gets to be 4 o'clock, so that you can then set your thermostat a little higher and not run your air conditioning as much during those peak hours. We could tell them not to use hot water, or recommend to them not to use hot water, not to use appliances that use a lot of electricity, and to postpone charging their electric cars. If we did that, we might be able to have a significant impact on on the amount of electricity we use in that 4 to 6 o'clock hour on some really, really hot days. It would also be possible to do some some pre-cooling in the center, for example, in the same way, so that some of that cooling energy would be used earlier in the day, not during those peak hours. And it would be slightly allowed to warm up slightly during those peak hours. Okay, so this is the general idea. So and okay, to go back a minute, these hours are called the 5 coincident peaks. So 5CP is the acronym they use for that. So could we predict those 5CP hours? Well, we couldn't, not really, not totally. But if we could pick 10 to 12 likely peak days and have people do this during the 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock hour on those days, chances are we would hit those peaks and cut way down on our capacity charge. So what would it take to do that? Well, first of all, here's the benefits. We would save Kendal thousands of dollars. We would do our part in reducing peak stress on the grid, and we would get lots of residents involved in our effort to fight climate change. So I think those are all very useful things. What we would need some people to monitor the weather forecasts in the big cities that I mentioned, and to try to see when some of the most likely days for coincident peaks were. We would have to have somebody doing data collection and analysis to determine how our usage varies with temperature and humidity, and to be able to predict what our peak would be if we didn't do anything, so that we could see how much of an impact we were having, how much we were actually saving, and therefore how much money we saved Kendal. And finally, and probably most difficult, we would have to have people educating the community and rallying people around this idea, letting people know on the day with posters and emails that this is the day when you have to take action, and here are the actions you might want to take. So it would take all of those things to make this actually work. So I guess my question here is, do we want to do this? And who's interested in working on it? Also, any questions about what I've just said?
I can't imagine that Crosslands wouldn't be interested in joining it if that would not complicate things, but
No, I think that would be great. Martin.
I'm glad to be a spokesperson.
Yeah, George, I've got a couple of points here. I'd be very interested in that. I may need some computer help to determine where the information might be gotten for some of the project, but I'd be very interested in this. The second thing is that last year it didn't really apply because we didn't meet in the auditorium. But for years, I have been wondering why the auditorium is kept so cool during the summer months, for movies and programs in the evenings. People go there and they take a sweater in there, which I feel is ridiculous to have to cool it down so much that in the summer that you have to take a sweater to be in there. And I don't know whether it's only the auditorium or the whole of the building there. But I can recall back in 1973, I think, when Jimmy Carter, when we had the energy crisis, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think he advocated setting the air conditioning at more like 74 or 70, at least higher than it is now. And I'm wondering, with the influence of this committee, which I think is doing a wonderful job, we might, or you might be able to convince the powers that be not to cool down the center so much. surely that would save a good deal throughout the summer when we have programs again.
Good thought, Martin.
I think even
Ellen.
now, the dining room is too cold.
I was just gonna say dining room. That's,
Yeah.
I always take a
So
sweater.
do I.
I always take a jacket.
Yeah.
Good. Ellen.
I was wondering too, if people, summertime, I would guess is a time when some people at least are away visiting family, etc. It's often time for vacations, and people could be warned to turn their air conditioning down. I mean, turn the heat up to a higher degree if you're going to be away. Because I was just thinking this year we'll be away most of July, probably covering all those days, but we could certainly turn our heat up so that the place isn't being air conditioned a lot the whole time we're gone. And I think others could be advised to do that too.
Turn it off.
Very
Turn it
good.
off.
Yeah.
George,
Mm-hmm.
is this, I'm reminded of some of the announcements I've seen on TV asking people to sign up with power generating services so that they can centrally reduce the power to your home at certain peak hours.
Yes, I'm not aware of any program of that kind in Pennsylvania, but it certainly is. There are some programs. Well, California led the way with that, and I think there are some other places too.
So, and I really like this idea, but I'm wondering as we begin to add some refinements to our system here that might include wireless controls of heating and air conditioning, if people would just be asked to sign to say, yes, I give George permission to turn my air conditioning to a warmer temperature when the environment calls for that.
I would like to see that. So there are smart thermostats that have Wi-Fi connectivity that can be used in that way. And also there are water heaters that now have that capability so that you could turn up the heat earlier in the day and then turn it down during the peak. What we don't have that you need to implement those things is campus-wide Wi-Fi. So campus-wide Wi-Fi becomes a priority as we think about some of that. Also, monitoring electrical usage in the cottages can't be done without campus-wide Wi-Fi. Jim, you have your hand up.
Too much of a dialogue here, but it seems to me we were talking earlier with Joe Deckman and others about what needs to be done to prepare us for the future. It strikes me that that's pretty high priority.
I would agree. Jim.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the fact that my hand keeps disappearing. If you want to go forward with it.
Yeah, that's your applause hand that keeps disappearing. You'd have to raise your blue hand to have it stay up.
Never mind. Okay, if you go forward with it, I'll volunteer to help with the data analysis to start with. It seems to me that a way to get this off the ground is to essentially communicate, as you have done already very clearly, and ask for volunteers and see whether we can get enough of the community to volunteer, and then we can get some senses. If we can track that, we get some senses to what's accomplished.
Good. Yeah, I think we can do that. If this committee gets behind it, then I think we can broaden out the request for volunteers.
And I think you'd need to have an informational program, so people understand what it's all about and why it's important to do this.
It is a little complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tat.
So George, just a question of clarification. This charge, as I understand it from your slides, if I followed, is based on real-time acquisition of information about our real energy use, right? It's not based on an assumption about a capacity or
No, it's so
based on real demand.
Right. PECO, our local utility, keeps hour by hour records of the electricity that we use, and that's the basis for our charge.
And thanks. And the second question is, maybe I missed it. Maybe you said, what's the basis for this? Is it because they're purchasing power from outside of that grid, or is it because they have to purchase expensive, whatever, nuclear power or natural gen power or something like that? What's the basis for the for the charge?
From my understanding of reading the PJM material, it is simply a matter of supply and demand. It's determined basically by an auction type process, and they determine what they think they will need in terms of kilowatt hours for the peaks in the summer, and then the penalty basically that you pay for what you use is based on that total that they come up with, your share of that total.
You
So
may
it's-
remember, Enron.
Yep, we're living in Texas.
This was one of their price manipulations, was to deal with these sort of peak demands. So this has been around for a few years, and the issue continues to be there of absolute peak demand. You start pulling in power supply that's normally shut down, and it costs a lot of money to start that back up.
And so
Anyway,
this could be for purchasing Quebec power or those kinds of things as well?
Yeah.
I'm not positive whether this exactly how this is determined, but that's something I can investigate some more, or I can point you toward some sources.
Yeah, thanks, George.
George, don't we have an auxiliary generator for peak times?
We have a generator, but it's not used in that way. And
Okay.
that's another possibility that we could investigate is, well,
Turn that on?
yeah, could we pick certain, 2 hours on certain days and turn the generator on? Would that have the same effect? And I'm not clear about that. That would be something still to be determined.
Interesting question.
Yeah, or flip a switch and have your solar panels kick in, huh?
Yes, at some point, I mean, solar panels are wonderful for this problem because they tend to produce their maximum output on a sunny day at the right time of day. So if we could do that, that would be great.
Let's get them. Let's get them.
All right. I'm for that. Well, it sounds like people are interested in this. I think we should perhaps set up another little subgroup of people who can plot out our strategy for getting this done. I'm certainly keen to do that, and I'm wondering who else would like to be involved in this program. I see Jim, I see Pete, I see Tat. Lynn wants to too, but Lynn's got to write these names down.
Well, it depends whether I'll help if I can.
Okay, Martin. Okay, that's a great start. All right, so we'll get started on this and see what we can do to put together some kind of a program. It's a pretty elaborate thing to get going, and it has to get going quick in order to be effective this summer. And we still don't have all the information that we need. Roy has given me some contacts with both Calpine, on whose bill this appears, and PICO, who tracks our hour-by-hour energy. And so I'm trying to get the necessary data to know exactly what's going on. But surely within a week or so, we should have those things at least pinned down. And okay, so I'll ask people when they can meet over the next few days here to get this thing rolling. I think it's a—
George, add me on there, will you please?
Onto
Okay.
the, Lynn, if you could add Gary's name to the list of people interested in that project. Okay.
great.
I just said Pete. Sorry.
Thanks. Okay. Well, that's great. I'm glad there's interest, and I think this could be really important in terms of arousing interest in the broader community in this whole topic. And that's something that I really want to do. Yes, Marilyn, you can stop recording. And once you have that, do you have the ability to post that on YouTube or someplace?
We have to figure out what to do with it once I do it.
Okay, I can put it on my YouTube account if that's helpful. Good. Okay, so I think that pretty much covers it for today. But I think this has been a very valuable meeting. I appreciate everybody coming, and lots of good stuff going on. So